Many people view the United States as the land of opportunity. They say if you work hard, you can achieve great success and great wealth. And social media, at least in my opinion, has really fueled a craving for luxury goods. People have a thirst for all the glitz and the glam that money can buy. Luxury vehicles, shiny boats, designer duds, Hermes handbags, you name it. The list of wants grows with every Instagram post. And if you have a great job, great, you can get that stuff. If you're a trust fund baby, great, you can get that stuff. But what about the people who have a craving for all those goods but aren't willing to work for it? I'm talking about con men, con women, grifters, flim-flammers who've turned up in every century. They're in literature. We've got Tom Ripley. We've got Uriah Heep. They turn up in society. We've got Anna Delvey. And don't forget Bernie Madoff. These are people without a moral compass who spend their time devising their next grift to obtain fast cash in order to buy all those luxe goods. Which brings me to the villain of this story, Jason Derek Brown. Hi, I'm T, and this is Bed Crime Stories. Please like, share, subscribe, leave me a comment, and if you want to support the work I do and keep me here on YouTube, please consider a membership or a PayPal donation. Anything and everything is much appreciated. Now, without further ado, let's dig in. This is a case that you can potentially help solve and in turn reap a $200,000 reward. All you have to do is look around at your neighbors, people in the grocery store, your gym, pretty much anywhere, and look for the face of a dangerous fugitive named Jason Derek Brown. Brown's unaliving of a 24-year-old armored car guard named Keith Palomares in November of 2004 was so merciless and cold-blooded that it landed him on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list in 2007. Brown's motive for taking out Palomares was the bank deposit bag from the AMC Theater that Keith was carrying back to an armored truck in Ahwautukee, Arizona. The bag contained 56,000 big ones, and instead of simply demanding the money, Jason Brown skipped the small talk and went straight to firing 6 high-velocity bullets at close range at Palomares. 5 of them made their way into his body, and Keith died a short time later. The 6th one shattered a window of the AMC. Right after the crime in late November of 2004, Brown seemingly walked off the face of the earth, and he's been off the grid ever since. Although there have been some reported sightings of him over the years, nothing has panned out. Today, Jason Derek Brown would be 55 years old. To understand what drove him to a life of crime, we have to go back to the beginning. Jason Derek Brown was born on July 1st of 1969 in Los Angeles, California. The Browns later moved to the affluent seaside town of Laguna Beach, the same one of MTV fame. In that land of sun-kissed surfers and blonde beach babes, Jason grew up with his 4 siblings 1 street away from their grandparents. It doesn't get more wholesome than that. Graced with a mop of dirty blonde hair, twinkling green eyes, and great athleticism, Jason fit right into the coastal lifestyle. He was as comfortable skiing on water as snow and could hang 10 with the best of them. Back in the day, people even mistook him for actor Sean Penn. A devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Jason played by the rules, at least in the beginning. Blessed with an above-average IQ, he got good grades, became an Eagle Scout, and served as a Mormon missionary in France from 1988 to 1990, becoming fluent in French and Spanish in the process. He went on to obtain a degree in international relations as well as an MBA. The world should have been Jason's oyster, but he had one Achilles heel that he couldn't seem to shake, and that was the influence of his father, David John Brown Sr. Jason's sister Jamie told Arizona's 12 News in 2021, Jason didn't just wake up one day like this. He was trained as a young child from the age of 8-9 years old to be a criminal, and that training came from Jason and Jamie's father, David Brown Sr. Brown Sr. was a guy who would frequently cross over the border into Tijuana, Mexico, and later return home with a thick wad of cash. He was a criminal masquerading as a businessman, and sometimes he'd take Jason along for the ride. But while he was grooming his son for a life of crime, Brown Sr. also despised seeing himself in Jason. Jason's sister Jamie described it like this: "My dad used to try and beat the bad out of him because he knew he was just like my dad. And then he ended up becoming my dad's little minion, helping him with all his dirty work." Now, in 1994, when the law was finally catching up with Brown Sr., and he felt the heat nipping at his heels, he suddenly disappeared, likely over the border into Mexico, never to return. One can only imagine how this affected Jason and his 4 siblings. A shocking rupture like that can cause deep psychological scars. Now, between 1990 and 2004, Jason floated through Orange County, California, and Utah. He spent time in both Dana Point and Newport Beach, and also Salt Lake City. He eventually married a nice Mormon girl and settled into adulthood. In Salt Lake City, Jason ran 2 businesses out of his home, Toys Unlimited and On the Doorstep Advertising. Unfortunately, Jason's marriage ended up in divorce. And after that, Jason underwent a radical change. He reinvented himself as a player. Part of the reinvention meant portraying himself as a wealthy businessman. He even started a modeling agency at one point where he charged aspiring young models $5,000, and then he'd take off, leaving them high and dry. He also began acquiring all the toys a grown man could want. He purchased a silver BMW M3 convertible, a black Cadillac Escalade, a Jeep, 2 quads, 2 dirt bikes, a Yamaha crotch rocket, and a boat. The problem was Jason didn't really pay for any of it. He'd walk into a car dealership and use a fake social security number and address. In 2000, Brown got caught stealing golf clubs from a store in North Carolina and was arrested. At that point, his fingerprints were entered into CODIS. By 2004, Jason had defaulted on at least 1 large loan, and he'd racked up tens of thousands of dollars in debt. He was also operating check and bank fraud scams for years to fund the image that he created for himself. A Phoenix detective stated that Brown may have also perpetrated several unsolved petty thefts and home invasions. So basically, Jason Derek Brown was a criminal through and through. Now, after watching a lot of movies involving big-time thefts, Jason began telling friends that the perfect crime would be to rob an armored truck, especially one that had picked up cash from a movie theater after a holiday weekend. It sounds like Jason's money troubles were coming to a head, and his ability to obtain loans had dried up. So it would appear that financial desperation had set in. So in 2004, Jason began secretly planning a big heist. As part of the plan, he took a firearms safety class at a Utah gun range. His instructor, Clark Apashian, remembered him as a guy who drove a silver BMW and who had a laid-back California vibe. But the instructor also described Jason as an obnoxious student who was inexperienced with firearms. Despite his inexperience, he passed the firearms test. Thus, he was able to get a concealed weapons permit. He immediately told his instructor that he wanted to purchase a weapon. The instructor recommended a small one, but Jason wanted the most powerful one. He insisted on a Glock 45, and he bought it with high-velocity ammunition. That is a dangerous, potentially lethal combination, especially in the hands of a violent person, someone without any morals. At some point, Jason moved to Ahwautukee, Arizona, and rented a home there. To his neighbors, he appeared to have it all. A great personality, all those fun toys, the motorbikes, the boat. But as we know, it was all one big house of flimsy cards waiting to crumple. Jason moved away from Arizona, but in November of 2004, he called a real estate friend of his, Ellen Robinson, and he asked her if he could stay with her. She said sure. Now, she also said that Jason would disappear during the day and then return at night. It turned out that Jason was spending his time in the Tonto National Forest shooting paper plates with his Glock. One day, he accidentally shot a hole in the truck of a guy who was camping there with his young son. The damage was to the tune of $1,300. Jason gave his name and his number to the man and said he'd pay for the damage. The man shared his address, and not long afterward, an envelope arrived with $1,300 in it and a gift card to Toys R Us for the man's son. Jason was also spending time at the Ahwautukee Mall, scoping out the AMC Theater. So he's there in his silver BMW in the parking lot, and he was there so often that people started to notice, and they're thinking, who's the creeper in the silver Beamer? And why is he out there every day looking at everything? A few days before the crime, Jason moved out of his friend's house and went to stay in a nearby hotel. He was getting ready to put his plan into action. He selected the Thanksgiving weekend, feeling sure that the AMC's bank deposit bag on Monday would be brimming with cash, and he was right. Now let's talk about the day of the crime. It's shortly after 10 a.m. on Monday, November 29th, 2004. An armored car is heading to the Ahwautukee Mall to pick up the holiday weekend box office deposits, $56,000 in cash. Two men are inside the armored car, a driver and his armed courier, Keith Palomares. Keith's job is to exit the armored car, go into the theater, pick up the cash from the manager, sign a receipt for the money, and carry the bank deposit bag back to the truck. It's a routine pickup, one that Keith has made many times before. Keith makes it safely inside the theater. He gets the money. But before he can reach the safety of the armored truck, a gunman springs out from behind a wall, fires 6 shots. Keith Palomares falls to the ground. The perpetrator grabs the money bag, takes off running, drops it, picks it back up, runs through an alley, hops onto a mountain bike that was stashed in the area, and pedals off as fast as he can. People in the area who recognize the distinctive sound of gunfire dial 911. Meanwhile, Keith Palomares is still moving on the ground, and his armored car driver does what he's trained to do, which is remain inside the truck and dial 911. Although Keith was armed, he never had a chance to remove his weapon from the holster. It had happened way too fast, and the perpetrator, rather than asking for the money and allowing Palomares to live, said nothing and just shot. And again, it was 6 bullets. Keith Palomares was transported to Good Samaritan Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. His family was absolutely devastated. This was a good man, a hard worker, and he deserved his life. More people heard the crime go down than saw it. The few witnesses that did see the crime told the cops the perpetrator was between 25 and 30 years old, either white or Hispanic, and was wearing a dark hoodie. One witness saw the man pedaling away at a crazy fast speed. A helicopter scanning the terrain later in the day spotted an abandoned bike. Detectives decided to dust it for fingerprints. As the detectives interviewed witnesses, the fingerprints were sent to the lab for processing. Upon entering them into CODIS, the detectives got a match: Jason Derek Brown. They then ran his name through the Bureau of Alcohol and Firearms and up-pinged a record of Jason Derek Brown purchasing a Glock in Utah. That weapon, as well as the ammunition Brown bought, matched what was used to harm Keith Palomares. And remember the guy with the truck in the Tonto National Forest? The bullet that went into his truck also matched those used in the crime. There was also a witness at the hotel where Brown had stayed who'd seen a man putting a mountain bike in a silver BMW convertible shortly before the crime. Security camera footage at the hotel showed Jason Derek Brown in the lobby on the day of the crime. The police and the FBI quickly triangulated Brown's cell phone. They were able to see that he was heading west out of Phoenix. Jason's phone logs also revealed that he was making dozens of phone calls to various family members, many of whom lived in California. Law enforcement discovered that Brown later made a cash deposit at a Wells Fargo bank in Dana Point, California. A grand jury quickly indicted Jason Derek Brown, and on December 4th, an arrest warrant was granted. Through cell phone triangulation and call logs, the cops could see that Jason had left Arizona and he'd driven to Las Vegas, Nevada. Although they didn't yet know it, Jason swapped out his silver BMW for his black Cadillac Escalade, which he had in storage there. Next, Jason drove to his childhood haunts of Orange County, California. 2 days later, on December 6th, the FBI was closing in on Jason's sister's house, and they were confident they would soon have their man in custody. However, there was a major glitch. Back in Arizona, the Phoenix PD had decided to issue an update on the high-profile case. So they held a press conference in which they shared Jason's name and his mugshot. A friend of Jason saw the press conference and called him to ask what was going on. This alerted Jason to the fact that the cops knew who he was. Before that, he probably thought he'd pulled off the heist of a lifetime, a crime that his father would have applauded. When a SWAT team finally did arrive at Jason's sister's house, they discovered that he'd left a mere 30 minutes earlier. Jason's sister lied to the agents, telling them that Jason was driving his BMW. But, of course, he was in his black Escalade. The police were able to determine that Jason had driven first through San Diego toward the border into Tijuana. But he didn't actually go into Mexico. Instead, he turned around and drove to Portland, Oregon. Now, during this period, he was sending packages to family members, including one to his brother, David John Brown II. Inside the boxes were mementos from Jason's life. It appeared that he was unloading all the vestiges of his former existence. The authorities later found the black Escalade abandoned at the Portland International Airport. Was that a ruse to make it look like Jason had hopped a flight overseas? He is fluent in French and Spanish, after all. The cops aren't sure. Now, after this, Jason went completely off the grid, and that's where he has remained ever since. When the police went to see Jason's brother, David Brown II, in Las Vegas to see if he knew where Jason's Beamer was, David lied and said he didn't know. But David was actually in possession of the Beamer, and he'd taken it in for a thorough cleaning inside and out. Any evidence of a crime in Arizona had been wiped away, and on April 20th of 2005, David Brown II was indicted on charges of obstruction of justice, and he spent 3 years on probation for that crime. It seems as though the Browns don't have any trouble lying. Some speculate that Jason eventually did go to Mexico to be with his father. But of course, nobody knows if the father was in Mexico still. Others think it's possible that Jason is maybe in French-speaking Canada or perhaps in France. One friend of Jason's could swear that he saw him in a car that was waiting for a stoplight in Salt Lake City. The police have speculated that it's possible Jason is alive and well and likely living with some woman who has no idea he's a fugitive from the law. It's also possible that he's grifting off many women, moving from lady to lady as he uses up their savings. Over the years, the FBI has released images of what they believe Jason might look like today. And as I said earlier, the reward for him is now at $200,000. So take a good look at his face. Imagine what he might look like at age 55. Maybe together we can track down Jason Brown and give the family of Keith Palomares some justice and closure.
Jason had that dark side because he was raised by my father.
For the first time, the sister of a fugitive from Arizona on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list is going on camera sharing her story. Jason Derek Brown is accused of killing an armored car guard in Ahwautukee and stealing thousands of dollars. He's been on the FBI's top 10 list for 14 years, and now his sister is revealing disturbing new details. Team 12's Colleen Sikora joins us with a look at the most wanted man in Arizona.
After nearly 17 years.
I never thought he would be a fugitive this long.
It's the past.
It's shocking and it's horrific.
That's lingered. Jason Derek Brown, on the run since November 29th, 2004. And for most of that time, now retired FBI supervisory agent Lance Lysing, searching.
It's always the victim. I mean, the victim's family, wanting closure and justice for them.
911, what is your emergency? There was about 5 shots fired.
Outside the AMC theaters near Ray and I-10 in Ahwautukee, armored car guard Keith Palomares is shot 5 times.
I killed the armored car guard instantly.
The shooter takes off with about $56,000 in cash, later ditching a bike, but leaving his fingerprints on it. The fingerprints traced back to Jason Derek Brown. Lysing says it's believed Brown came here nearly 17 years ago with a plan in mind.
There was surveillance. There were items purchased. He was out training in the desert, practicing his shooting.
But to get to this point,
while he could assassinate an innocent armored car guard during a robbery, he was also image conscious and wanted to be the good guy in the life of the party at the same time.
Still to this day, I just can't believe that he would do something like this because he was such a kind, loving person.
But it's what Jason's sister, Jamie Brown Martin, calls a dark side.
Jason didn't just wake up one day like this, that he was trained as a young child from the age of 8, 9 years old to be a criminal.
Jamie says that training came from their father, who disappeared 10 years before Jason.
My dad used to try to beat the bat out of him.
In the days before Brown was identified as the suspect, he came to Jamie's door and stayed for several days, never knowing what he was accused of doing.
There was no indication of any sort that there was anything out of the ordinary going on.
She'll never forget what Jason left her with.
I said, "When are you coming back?" And he goes, "I'll be back someday." And I go, "Well," and I remember him hugging me again, like a second hug, like a tighter hug. And then I just watched him drive off. And in the back of my head, I was just thinking, why would he say something like that? Like someday.
Someday has turned into nearly 17 years.
It's torn apart our family.
Still waiting on closure.
He is not the type of personality that can just live in the middle of nowhere by himself for 17 years.
Closure for Jason's family, for Keith's family, for the case.
Jason will eventually be found one day.
The FBI is offering a reward of up to $200,000 for his arrest. Anyone with information or tips is asked to contact them. We're in Phoenix. Colleen Sikora, 12 News.